So this is Dr. Kavita Singh, Associate Professor in Department of Civil Engineering in Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. So today we are going to discuss a topic called as Flood and Drought Impact Assessment and Monitoring. So first of all, we should understand when we are learning about this watershed, the applications of GIS in water resource, we have to understand about the flood and drought. So these are the two different kinds of disasters which will be frequently occurring in some areas which are vulnerable to it. So we have to understand how the GIS will help in monitoring and how it will help wherever the areas are impacted with this flood and drought, how the GIS helps in this monitoring and controlling this kind of, we can say, mitigating in such areas of the due to this flood and drought disasters. So how we can mitigate through using this GIS, we'll understand today. So we'll discuss this lectures today. So just we'll start with some contents. What are the contents we are going to discuss about it? First of all, we have to understand what is a flood and what is a drought. And later we have to see how this will impact the assessment, what is the impact and on the environment, and how we can assess it and how we can monitor, that we are going to learn today. So first of all, let us start with this flood. So what is a flood? Basically, a flood is a disaster. So it's a natural disaster, whereas it can occur by human beings also. So it is a natural as well as it is a man-made disaster. Most of the time it is a natural disaster. So whenever this disaster occurs, most of the areas which will be overflowed of the water, the overflowing of the water in such areas will drown many cities, many places, many villages, many urban areas due to this flood, due to this overflow of the water in such areas. And why it occurs? Basically, when the flood occurs due to over rainfall or heavy rainfall and there is no seepage in the ground, the runoff will be very high in such areas and it will accumulate in such areas which areas are in the plain conditions. So in the slope region, the slopes will be it will create a very high runoff, and from there the water goes to the plain areas. So wherever the water is accumulated, there the areas will be maybe flooded with the water. So basically, what is a flood? Flood is a overflow of the water. When it is in excess in the quantity, whenever a rainfall occurs in such areas which is in excess in the quantity, it occurs whenever a rainfall occurs in very heavy manner with the hailstorms and with a high intensity. What happens? The runoff will be more. So as the runoff is more, what happens? The flood is overflow of water that submerges the land and that is usually dry. So due to that, the overflow of water, due to this overflow of water, so what it will do is submerge entire land will be submerged, and usually whichever area it is dry, that area also will be submerged in the water. So lot of property loss and lot of life loss will be there in this kind of conditions. So most of the time in the rainy seasons, we will see that most of the areas which are low lying in the areas, that areas will be flooded with the water because of this heavy rainfall and because of the soil conditions, because of the topographic conditions. This all we can include in this. These are all factors which will affect directly this flood areas. So if the sense of flowing water, and the word may also be applied to inflow of tide. So flood are the significant concern in the agriculture and in the public health. So it is a significant concern, and it is also affecting the agriculture part and the public health. How it is affecting the agriculture? Agriculture means if the water is overflowed or if it is over flooded, if the total water is submerged in such areas wherever the crops are grown, so that crops can damage. Which crops doesn't need more water, like crops like wheat crop, this kind of crop which doesn't need more water, that types of crops will be totally damaged due to this water overflow of the water or water presence in such areas. And it also affects the public health. How it affects the public health is like due to this flood, the water will be accumulated in regions wherever the lower lying areas are there. So due to the accumulation of the waterborne diseases will be frequently spreading in such areas. So the waterborne diseases like malaria or typhoid, this kind of diseases will occur, or flu will occur due to this flood wherever the water is stagnant in such areas. So these are the problems where we can just due to the flood it occurs, like in agriculture as well as in the human health. Now human changes the environment often increase in the intensity and frequency of flooding. Now the types of floods include flooding, riverine flooding. So what are the different types? If you see what are the different types of flood we have here is aerial flooding. So what is aerial flooding? Aerial flooding is like entire area, either it is a village or city, it will be entirely covered with the water and it will be flooded with the water, and that is called as aerial flooding. Now riverine flooding, what is riverine flooding? The riverine flooding is due to overflow of the rivers. Overflow of the rivers, how it happens? Either through melting of ice, it happens melting of ice, or suddenly the water is uh, flowed in the river, and river is not having that much capacity to hold the water. That's why this kind of riverine flooding will occur. So if the riverine flooding has occurred, the near part, the banks of the river will be totally flooded or totally submerged in the water, which will be affecting the crops, will be affecting the urban areas, will be affecting the villages, it will be affecting the property, and the loss of lives also will be affecting due to this kind of flooding. So the coastal flooding and the urban flooding. So what is coastal flooding? In the coast, you can see that wherever the coastline is there, in the coastline, the flooding will occur in the coastal regions wherever the tide has occurred. So this will happen in the coastal region. The reason here is due to the tides, okay? Tides or waves or heavy rainfall, okay, which has occurred in that. So due to that, this coastal flooding will be occurring. And what about urban flooding? What is urban flooding? Urban flooding is basically, it deals with, most of the time it is due to the man-made structures or due to this man-made activities, like if there is any leakage of the tanks, leakage of the water, or broken pipes. Due to that, this flash floods like condition will occur in the urban areas. So we can say it as flash floods, okay. So flash floods will occur in such regions due to the human activities, or else due to the natural activities also the flood may occur. Like if the runoff condition is more, if the entire area is converted into the concrete structures, there is no way the water will seep inside the ground, it will just flow on the ground. So there is also the intentional flooding of land that would otherwise remain dry. So this may take place for agricultural, military or river management purposes. So for example, agricultural flooding may occur in preparing the paddy fields for growing of semi-aquatic rice in many countries. Now this is the example of flood. If you see here, flood means this is the area, we can say it is an aerial flooding due to the heavy rainfall. What has happened is this area is a plain area. So this is the picture which is taken from the aerial photograph, okay, aerial photo. This is an aerial photo taken by the aerial photogrammetry, or we can even take the photograph from the satellite images. So this is one of the aerial photo which has been taken through the cameras of the aerial photo, okay. So in this you can see the areas which are lower lying areas. This all areas are totally submerged in the water. Even the houses you can see here, it is totally submerged in the water due to the heavy flooding in such regions. So this can happen either with the flash flooding, or nearby this tank may overflow and it may appear near the tank or pond wherever the lake is present. So this can happen flash floods, or as well as later due to the natural disasters also. So next, coming to the drought. So what is a drought? So drought is also a disaster, like it's a natural disaster, of course, and it's not a man-made disaster. It is basically a natural disaster. It's a condition where we don't have much of water for even for our regular usage purposes. So shortage of water, shortage of rainfall, shortage of groundwater, shortage of surface water due to the topographic conditions or due to the less rainfall in such regions, or arid region or semi-arid region, we can say. So drought is a period of the drier than the normal conditions. So it's like in dry season, in the whole year we have few of the months which are dry, Like summer months, if we talk about April, May, June, these are the dry seasons. But due to this drought conditions, there may not be any rainfall in such regions like June, July, August, September. Like these seasons, you may not receive much rainfall. We receive very less rainfall. Due to that, the drought conditions occur. So it's a prolonged period where the rainfall is very less for a long period. So that conditions may occur due to this. That drought conditions may occur due to such kinds of problems. So a drought can last for days, for months, or years. So drought is such a conditions. It can last for the months or years, or for many years there may not be much water. So that the areas which are not receiving the rainfall, the areas which are not having the much forest regions, that areas will be totally affected with this drought conditions. So drought often has large impacts on the ecosystem. It has a strong impact on the ecosystem and agriculture of affected regions and causes harm to the local economy. So it can even impact to the ecosystems. Ecosystem may get dry due to less rainfall, and the migration of the animals may occur, and the agriculture will also be affected. There will be less productivity in such regions, and it will harm the local economy. If there is a less productivity, the economy will be very much affected, and there is the economy of such region or economy of such country will be totally goes down, because the total economy out of this agriculture will contribute at least 60% of the total economy of the any country. So that's why the total economy will be affected whenever the drought condition occurs in such region or country. So annual dry seasons in the tropics significantly increase the chance of drought developing and subsequent increase in the wildfires risk. So wherever you see this kind of drought conditions, there is a chance of increasing the wildfires, we can say, or forest fires, we can say, because the total forest will be dried up. There is no rainfall. The greenery will go. The entire leaves will be dry. Due to that, there is a much chances of the wildfires, and there is a much chances of the forest fires in such regions. So heat waves can be significantly worsened in the drought conditions by increasing evapotranspiration. If evapotranspiration is there, then there will be a problem with the heat waves, and the conditions may become more worsened, and this dries out a forest and other vegetation and increases the amount of fuel for the wildfires. So drought is a recurring feature of the climate in the most parts of the world, and it is becoming the more extreme and less predictable due to climate change, which dendrochronologically studies date back to 1900. Now there are three kinds of drought effects. So what are the drought effects? It will affect different effects by the drought is environmental, economic, and social. So it affects the environmental. Due to this drought conditions, the entire environment may be changed. There is less rainfall, there is no water, the problem with the animals, the problem with the humans, and the survival problem may occur due to this drought conditions. And economic, as I said before also, there is low productivity, low agriculture. Due to low productivity, low agriculture, the growth will be less. Once the growth is less, the productivity will be less, and it directly affects the economy of such region. And social impact, if you see in society also, the impacts will be there. There is less society will be there. People will migrate from one place to another. Wherever the water problem won't be there, they will migrate from the drought conditions to the places wherever the water is available. So environmental effects include the drying of wetlands, more and larger wildfires, loss of biodiversity also will happen. So it will affect the biodiversity, and loss of problems will happen. Wetlands will be drying, and there is no larger wildfires will occur, and there is no habitat for the biodiversity. Economic impacts include disruption of water supply for people, less agricultural productivity, and therefore more expensive food production will be there. Now this is the examples of drought conditions if you see here. So these are the four types of examples we can see here of the drought conditions. So the total land will be dried up, and there will be soil conditions will be totally dried up. There is no moisture in the field, or there is no moisture on the land. So there is no moisture present, the growth of the crops won't be there. The agriculture will not grow, the crops won't grow, then directly it impacts the economy. Now here you can see due to dust is in this condition, there is less rainfall, so dust pollution will be happening and the entire vegetation will get dried up. Now here fires, you can see forest fires. Here the total vegetation has got dried up. So these are the conditions, these are the impacts will happen and due to this flood and drought conditions. Now how we can assess and how we can monitor, how the GIS is helpful in this, let us understand. Okay. So flood and drought impact assessment and monitoring, it is a crucial understanding, mitigating and managing the effects of these extreme weather events. So what are the different impact assessments we can see here under the impact assessment? And what is impact means? How much impact it gives to the environment, how much impacts it gives to the few of the parameters if we see. So impact assessments on, if you talk about floods, so how does it impacts on the floods, like how hydrological modeling, it stimulates the flood scenarios and to assess the potential water levels to flow velocity and it extents of the inundation. Now damage assessment, if you talk about damage assessment, it evaluates the impact of infrastructure, agriculture, housing and human lives. It will evaluate the infrastructure of the people and the agriculture, housing may present, and the human lives also will be affected by this kind of conditions. So this often includes both direct damages and indirect damages. Like direct damages, it can destroy the homes, and indirect damages, it will economic losses due to the disrupted transportation will happen. Now environmental impact. So what is the environmental impact here? Assesses the effects of the ecosystem, water quality and the soil erosion. So it will affect the water quality definitely, and it will affect the ecosystem. How does it affect the water quality when you talk about this affecting of the flood and drought conditions? So if the flood occurs, there is a problem in the water quality. Why? Because it whenever the flood has occurred and wherever the water will be accumulated, lot of contaminants will be mixed in that water and it can seep inside the ground and it can mix inside the groundwater. So you may have the water quality problem and you may have the soil erosion problem. So wherever the flood has occurred, so a lot of areas which are not having the forest regions, that will be totally affected with the soil erosions. The top layer of the soil will be totally washed away, and there is a problem in the areas where the soil erosion may occur, and it will affect the entire soil and the productivity goes down in such region. Now droughts. What is about droughts? What do you mean by about droughts? So droughts is also like it's a drought indices. It tools like standardized precipitation index and the Plummer drought severity index and quantify the severity duration of the droughts. And in agricultural impacts, what happens? Evaluates the prediction in the crop yields and soil degradation will happen and the water availability for the irrigation may occur. Socioeconomic impact. It considers the effect on water supply, energy production, food security, and the livelihoods. Monitoring. Now, if you talk about monitoring, how we can monitor this? So, flood monitoring, how we can do? So, as I said, remote sensing is very useful tool here. We can use this technology for monitoring this drought, and we can do the assessment, and we can reduce the losses with the help of this flood assessment tool. Like remote sensing, if we talk about remote sensing, it uses the satellites and drones to monitor the rainfall. How does it use the satellites and drones to monitor the rainfall? It will just monitor the river levels. It will tell you about the river flood extent in the real time. For example, this much area is covered with the water. It will tell you about the how much area is flooded with the water. This much area. So suppose this is the river which is flowing like this. So how much area is affected? This much area is affected, or this much area is affected. It will tell you the area which is directly affected with the flood, and it can monitor and tell the river levels, how much water is present in that, and flood extent in the real time. Now, ground-based sensors, what the ground-based sensors can do here is, it includes the stream gauges and rain gauges to provide localized accurate data. It will provide you the rain gauges accurate data. It will provide you the accurate information to stream gauges, and it can give you the information about the rain conditions in such region. Early warning system is also one of the most important part here in the monitoring system. It combines the hydrological models with the real-time data to predict and warn about the impending floods. So it will just warn us before itself. Like if you see, every time we will see the monitoring system, like IMD department will just give you some like before itself, it will just warn you about the rainfall, and we can just understand that this area is going to uh, in this such area is going to occur a heavy rainfall. So we just predict, the MD department will be predicting, it will give you the predictions before itself to avoid the losses. So we can just take precautions based on this early warning system while the monitoring conditions. If you monitor it continuously, it will give us the warning system, it will predict us, it will warn us, and it is impending about the impending flood and help to reduce the human material losses. Now, monitoring, how we can just go with this monitoring of the flood monitoring. It uses this flood monitoring uses the satellites, drone, and early warning systems, you can say. Now, policy and governance, if you're talking about the policy and governance, integrated water resource management, it encourages the sustainable management of the water resource. It can, considering the impacts of the both floods and drought, it will help us to consider the both floods and drought conditions. When you go with this integrated planning of the water resource management, it encourages the sustainable management of the water resources. Considering the impacts of both floods and drought, it will help us to just consider the impacts of the floods and drought, and it will tell us about this management policies, that what are the precautions to be taken, and it will tell you about the rules, regulations to be followed by the human beings to avoid the losses and to predict the losses. So there is a while doing this flood and drought assessment, first of all, there is a disaster management cycle, we call it as disaster management cycle is followed for the prediction and assessment, we can say. If we're talking about this disaster management cycle, so there is a disaster management cycle which will help you to predict this type of drought and monitoring. So in this cycle, what it is there is, first of all, prediction is taken, and prevention phase. There are different phases of drought. Suppose wherever the event has occurred, so we have the phase, like we have preparedness phase. So when the event will occur here, then we have, after the event occurs, we have the response. Then after the response, what will be there? Mitigation. After the response, rehabilitation, and we have mitigation again. Okay, so this is how the cycle is followed to manage the disaster, to manage this flood and drought impacts. So always the preparedness will be taken in these policies. If you see, government will give you some guidelines to take care about this kind of conditions whenever it occurs. So under these conditions, to manage the to manage the water resource sustainably, to consider the impacts of both flood and drought, it will help us to tell us about the preparedness phase. So we have to be prepared, and whenever the event occurs, event like disaster occurs, either flood or drought, whenever it occurs, what happens is, the effect will be less due to the preparedness. The effect will be less. So once we are prepared with such kind of conditions, it will help us to manage it, and it will help us to manage the water resource too. It will help us to lower the impacts in such regions. And suddenly after this, response will be there. So response immediately we can give to such kind of people or such area, and later the rehabilitation phase will be there. After rehabilitation, the mitigation will be taken care. So what is mitigation here is? Mitigation here is to finding out the other way to just reduce the losses in such regions. So if you just find out this way to reduce the losses in such regions, will be again helpful in the flood or drought conditions. So here, integrated water resource management, it will encourage the sustainable management of water resource. We have this integrated water resource management by the government, which this organization, government, will help us to manage the water resource in sustainable way, and it will just consider the impacts of both floods and drought whenever this type of condition is going to occur. Now, disaster risk reduction can also be done due to this monitoring system. So when we keep on monitor this drought and flood conditions, so risk reduction can be done, like reduction of the drought and flood conditions may happen, like policies and framework aimed at the reducing the risk and impact of the disasters through the preparedness, response, and the recovery strategies. As I said you just now, so we have different phases here of disaster. This is a disaster management cycle. Just now I told you. We have a preparedness phase, response, and recovery strategies. So this way it goes on. Recovery strategies, after recovery, again mitigation will start. So here we have like preparedness, then you have response, then you have recovery. Okay. Then after that we have mitigation. So these are the different phases. So once the preparedness phase, we are ready with this kind of conditions, so the risk may reduce due to this preparedness phase. And response phase, immediately once we respond it, the recovery conditions may start in these strategies. So understanding and effectively managing the impacts of the drought and flood and drought conditions, it will require a multidisciplinary approach and integrating science, technology, policy, and community and engagement. So it will help us to create an integrated policy by using the technology, and it will help us in the community and the engagement of this kind of conditions. And later part, you can just reduce the losses based on this entire cycle. If you the entire monitoring system works on this cycle, like recovery, first of all preparedness, when we are prepared with this such conditions, then the event occurs, the response occurs, then the recovery occurs, and then the mitigation will start. This is the cycle which keeps on going, which will reduce the risk of the disaster like flood and drought. So remote sensing in GIS plays a very important role. It plays a very crucial role here, which will help us to tell us about this drought and flood conditions, and it will tell us about the present scenario, present condition of such area, which will be helpful in such region to avoid the losses, to reduce the losses in such regions. So this is how we are able to manage this disaster, and we are able to monitor and we are able to assess the impacts of these kind of disaster in such regions. So this is how we can just find out these conditions may occur at any places wherever you see the places where you have a more number of heavy rainfall. The rainfall is heavy, and the areas are like evergreen forest areas. Such areas will be receiving more rainfall. So that kind of areas may affect with this drought conditions, or sorry, flood conditions. And drought conditions, wherever the areas are receiving less rainfall, may occur due to this. The drought condition may occur. So before itself, based on the year wise, if you see the previous year data, 2-3 years data, how the year wise, how the rainfall condition is there in such region, how the drought condition is there in such region, based on that the preparedness phase will be taken place to just be aware of such conditions, and easily we can manage by the this phases, and easily we can manage this disaster, or we can reduce the losses of such events. So here assessment is very important based on the satellite data and topo sheet data, based on the photogrammetry data or aerial photos. We can just use the temporal image before and after situations of the flood. Before, how was the situation? After flood, how is the situation? Based on that, we can just prepare a map of the flood, which area is flooded with the water. Based on that map preparation, we can come to a conclusion. Such areas which are flooded with the water is a lower lying area, and it will be affected every time whenever the water will be heavy rainfall will occur. So such conditions, such areas, we should just mitigation practices we should take care. The construction of the houses, we have to see that it should not be low lying construction, it should be constructed on heights, or such areas may be avoided for the urban areas construction works. So this is how we can just assessment, and we can do the monitoring every time with the help of remote sensing. As like remote sensing, due to monitoring itself, we are able to get the warning system, we are able to get the predictions of daily weather conditions which is going to occur, whether the heavy rainfall is going to occur. We every time see like predictions, 3 days heavy rainfall, 2 days heavy rainfall, another hour is going to occur heavy rainfall. These predictions we can use due to these technologies of remote sensing and GIS. So this is very helpful in the flood and drought assessment. Now these are few of the references which you can go through to find out more content about this flood and drought impact assessment. So Dr. M.N.G. Reddy book, we can just refer this book to find out the more content about it, and you can just go through this link to find out the more information about this flood and drought conditions. First of all, you should understand about the flood and drought, then what are the impacts to the environment, society. Based on that, we can just come to a conclusion. We can just go to the analysis part, and we can go do some planning in such regions wherever the flood and drought conditions are going to occur. So that's all for today. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.